One of the commonest questions asked in your examination is refractory period. Let's understand what we are supposed to write if this question is asked. So let's understand what is the meaning of refractory period and come to the definition of the refractory period. Now, during an action potential, the stimulated area of the membrane remains unresponsive to a second stimulus in the most part. So what does this mean is that whenever I have stimulated a membrane, it is going to generate an action potential, but the stimulus should be a threshold stimulus. So whenever an action potential is going on, at that point of time, if I give a second stimulus, I am not going to get one more action potential. So the length of the time during which the membrane is unresponsive to the second stimulus, that means the membrane is not responding to the second stimulus, for how much length of time it is not responding during that action potential, that is what is called as refractory period. And there are two types of refractory period. One is called as absolute refractory period, another one is called as the relative refractory period. Let's understand what is the difference between these two, and also let's dive into the ionic basis of absolute and the relative refractory periods. So now, what is absolute refractory period? Absolute refractory period is a period from the firing level, this is the firing level, until the repolarization is 1/3 complete. So from here till here is the absolute refractory period. Now, during this period, a second action potential cannot be elicited however strong the stimulus is. Now, the reason here is lying in the properties of the voltage gated sodium channels. Now, the voltage gated sodium channels are having two gates. One is called as an activation gate, which is present at the outer surface of the cell membrane. Another one is called as the inactivation gate, now which is present at the inner surface of the cell membrane. Now this activation gate is closed when the membrane potential is minus 70 millivolts. So minus 70 millivolts is nothing but the resting membrane potential. So whenever the cell membrane is at rest, that is what is called as the resting membrane potential, which is minus 70 millivolts. At that point of time, the activation gate is closed, and hence the sodium from outside cannot enter inside. Now whenever I apply a threshold stimulus to the cell membrane, what is going to happen? The activation gate is going to open up. So as soon as the activation gate opens, the sodium from outside is going to enter inside. This is what is called as a sodium influx. So this is going to cause depolarization, wherein the membrane potential from minus 70 millivolts moves swiftly to plus 35 millivolts. That means from here, the membrane potential goes till here, goes to plus 35 millivolts. Now what is going to happen at plus 35 millivolts? At plus 35 millivolts, the inactivation gate is going to close. Okay, the inactivation gate is going to close, and the sodium channels are going to stay in this closed state because of the closure of this inactivation gate till the potential almost reaches back again to minus 70 millivolts. So when they are in this closed state, doesn't matter however strong the stimulus I am applying, I am not going to get an action potential. So this is the ionic basis of absolute refractory period. Now let's understand what is the meaning of the second refractory period, which is the relative refractory period. Now the relative refractory period begins from the same point where the absolute had ended. That is, it is going to begin from the end of the absolute refractory period, and it is going to extend till the beginning of one more phase of action potential, which is called as a after depolarization. So that means relative refractory period begins from the end of the absolute refractory period to the start of the after depolarization. So here the action potential can be elicited, but the stimulus should be very, very strong. That means the stimulus here, it should be a supra threshold stimulus. It should be a supra threshold stimulus. Now what happens is, why we can get an action potential when we apply a supra threshold stimulus here is, not all the sodium channels, they enter back into the resting state at minus 70 millivolts. Few may enter into the resting state at minus 62 millivolts. Few may enter into the resting state at minus 64. Few may enter at minus 68 millivolts. So those who have entered into the resting state, they can be opened upon application of the supra-threshold stimulus. So during this period, if I am going to apply a very strong stimulus like a supra-threshold stimulus, I am going to get an second action potential. That is why this period is what is called as the relative refractory period. So this is what we should write in the examination if this question is asked. Thank you for listening.